This program was made possible by the Florida Humanities Council. We come from all over, and we become one state, where we share in the history and become part of the culture that is Florida. The Florida Humanities Council, bringing Floridians together by sharing the stories of our state.
The promise of paradise and living a dream. This is Florida. Too many cars, a fragile ecosystem, relentless sprawl, and 18 million people. This is Florida too. Though the recession has stopped Florida's growth dead in its tracks, millions of new residents are still expected in the coming years. Where will they live? One city is working on an answer. Downtown St. Petersburg is going back to the future.
The population is aging, and baby boomers want to live in cities. They're not as interested in living in subdivisions, and so are millennials, the young kids coming out of college. And they want to go to a place where art is available, where bands can play, where there's great spaces.
Thanks in part to a public space envisioned more than 100 years ago along St. Petersburg's waterfront, what is happening in this city may leave you green with envy.
Living in downtown St. Petersburg is just absolutely fabulous.
Not too long ago, some vowed to stay away from St. Petersburg.
But it was very old looking. I promised I'd never come back to St. Petersburg. Little did I know I end up living here.
So what has given this alluring city a new lease on life?
It's a 30-year overnight success.
But here in the Sunshine City, clouds threaten to cover that sunshine. What about Baywalk, envisioned as a new town square key to the success of downtown, now an ailing, controversial shopping and entertainment complex? Still unclear, can St. Petersburg build a downtown community for all citizens, even the homeless?
Questions of historic preservation, of affordable housing, of kind of social justice are enormously important and interconnected problems that the city is going to have to face.
As unmistakable as the turn of a traffic light, today's economic picture looks quite a bit different than it did just a few years ago. Nevertheless, St. Petersburg has a distinct vibe about it.
The future, despite the recent economic downturns, looks very, very, very bright.
On a canvas still open to interpretation, the city by the bay is reinventing itself, determined to make a new place in the sun. In 1885, Dr. W.C. Van Bibber told the American Medical Association, after years of searching, he had finally found Health City.
He also happened to own land there, and he was perfectly willing to share some of this land with some of the people at the conference. But he said he'd found Health City, and it was on the Pinellas Peninsula, and that was sort of the origins of the community that would become St. Petersburg.
Unimpeded by the heat, humidity, and mosquitoes, St. Petersburg grew from a hardscrabble hamlet to prospering town.
Back in New York City and Boston, and if you were on the railroad, you would see on the railroad marquee, the train to St. Petersburg, the train to St. Petersburg.
By 1905, St. Petersburg had a couple of thousand people, as well as a power plant, water system, and telephones. That same year, the new trolley line was extended to the end of the 3,000-foot-long electric pier, a plan to turn the city's unsightly working waterfront into a deep-water port never made it. William Straub, editor and new owner of the St. Petersburg Times, had a more novel idea.
And he dreamed of a very different kind of city, a place where people could enjoy a kind of leisurely life, where there would be a certain amount of enterprise, but there would be no smokestacks, there wouldn't be any industry. With a number of other kind of city beautiful enthusiasts, over the first decade of the 20th century, he was able to gather together a large parcel of land and to protect the public waterfront.
Home to one of the most unusual waterfront settings in North America, the St. Petersburg economy soon thrived around winter tourism. The arrival of spring training baseball was followed by decades of ingenious tourist promotion.
They were just looking to promote St. Petersburg, develop it into this paradise that people would come and visit, and it worked.
After World War II, the demographics of St. Petersburg began to change.
Central Avenue, the main street of this modern city, is lined with green benches, a tradition in St. Petersburg.
Seasonal tourists returned to the city of green benches to retire.
And Williams Park, they find, is a delightful place to take a stroll.
Comedian Johnny Carson joked, St. Petersburg was God's waiting room.
Gerontophobia, as it's sometimes called, became a powerful cultural influence from the 1960s onward. It was not cool to be associated with senior citizens.
Florida's younger vacationers headed for the beaches and later attractions like Disney World. Like other cities across the nation, downtown St. Petersburg was in crisis from America's flight to the suburbs.
Live farther away, you'd build out the suburbs, and you'd drive your car there.
The Sunshine City lost much of its luster. Shopping dried up, businesses closed, the economy faded.
Festival of States Parade.
In 1976, the drum major for DeLand High School led his marching Bulldogs in St. Petersburg's annual Festival of States Parade. Lewis Murphy vowed never to return.
Pigeons, green benches, old people.
Grad student Tim Clemens first visited St. Petersburg in 1982.
Weren't a lot of people, but actually but the structures were interesting, and the scale and the character, and the waterfront. I remember really being struck by the waterfront.
During the 1980s, a local attorney discovered his interest in downtown. George Rodert liked history and old buildings.
When I started, the older structures were simply not appreciated and were in varying stages of decay.
The downtown did look a little under the weather when I got here in 1980, but there's been an amazing concerted effort to revitalize the downtown.
I call it the Renaissance of downtown St. Pete. It's a 30-year overnight success.
The long-running project has downtown residents like Dar Webb living a life she's always imagined.
There's restaurants, there's theaters, there's parks, there's shopping, there's movies, there's people you know on the street.
From their converted living space in the historic Snell Building, Dar Webb and husband Clint Page live in a downtown world measured by footsteps, not miles per gallon.
You can walk 5 minutes from here to the supermarket, to the pharmacy, another couple minutes more to a Barnes & Noble bookstore and the university. Another direction you can walk to the waterfront, to museums, to theaters, to 20-some restaurants within 2 blocks of this spot. What's not to like?
Living in the one-time office building constructed by visionary developer Perry Snell in 1928, Dar and Clint couldn't be happier.
We really don't have to go off our block much to be entertained.
Since she retired 5 years ago, this lively baby boomer has been immersed in volunteerism and business enterprise, all within walking distance.
There's been an amazing concerted effort to revitalize the downtown, part of what is known nationally or internationally as the new urbanism. Many, many people have, I think, contributed to this. It's interesting that it's also been part of a kind of a neighborhood renaissance.
The conscious effort to re-energize neighborhoods with pride and a sense of community has shown positive results. Among the city's 100-plus neighborhoods, downtown. What has led to the revitalization of the city's most unique neighborhood is not easy to answer.
It really is a series of things.
The rebirth of this downtown has been a continuous evolution of events. In a mix of government, social, and economic forces, one project has paved the way for another. Expansion of the University of South Florida, the in-town redevelopment plan, SRI's Marine Research and Technology Center. The wheels keep on rolling. But talk of this downtown's revival never goes too long without mention of an iconic hotel. Built during the 1920s, the Vinoy, with its signature Mediterranean revival architecture, is not only a classic from the Florida boom, it is St. Petersburg.
The Yankees, Babe Ruth, celebrities, you name it, they've been at this hotel. But in the early 1980s, late 1970s, this hotel was a derelict.
The hotel's 1990 restoration symbolized a beleaguered downtown's new beginning. It also marked a rediscovery of St. Petersburg's charm, character, and personality. About the time the Vinoy was up and running, attorney George Rodert had already turned his interest in some of the city's older buildings into a sideline of restoring them.
And having our heritage still with us even in the form of architecture and scale, and just gives us a sort of a physical bridge back to the past.
Among the 40 or so buildings Rodert linked from past to present is the 500 block of Central Avenue. He converted the old 4-story Alexander Hotel into an office building. Other storefronts found new life as retail shops and restaurants.
It was like the first olive out of the bottle.
The old Rutland's department store was transformed into Florida Craftsman's Gallery. In 1990, this entire block was a ghost town.
It was all vacant. They were all shuttered up, in disrepair. It's just horrible.
George Rodert's hopefulness and grassroots approach to making downtown St. Petersburg more inviting was shared by others. In 1993, Emmanuel Roux got in on the ground floor of the city's growing restaurant business.
The downtown had been suffering, and there was a vacuum, and to me it was obvious that what had happened in many other cities in the country was going to happen here.
In the former Detroit hotel built in 1888, Roux opened the Garden. Wanting to be closer to the downtown he always admired, architect Tim Clemens moved here too. In 1996, along an alleyway, Clemens built a row of townhouses.
I believe it had been 1981 when the last residential structure had been built in downtown.
What followed was a flurry of downtown projects. New condos, more restaurants, the $40 million Baywalk Retail and Entertainment Center.
Like every year we were just getting, sort of filthy from all the dust and debris of the construction sites, but that was the kind of nuisance that I enjoyed as an architect especially, but also as a downtowner. If you want to live in the middle of things, the more things there are to live in the middle of, the better.
While Clemens' short walk from new townhouse to nearby office became an enjoyable routine, St. Petersburg's promising urban oasis bubbled up with the arts.
I think that St. Petersburg is hip and cool.
Adding to cornerstones like the Museum of Fine Arts, American Stage, and the Dali Museum, St. Petersburg experienced an explosion of art and artists. Born in St. Petersburg, Nate Najar plays cool jazz on a classical guitar.
The audiences here have been very supportive, and more important than that, I've been getting to know the audiences here. I see a lot of the same faces at my appearances and seem to really genuinely be interested in the music that we're presenting.
Writer and theater director Bob Devin Jones arrived from Los Angeles. In 2004, Jones co-founded Studio at 620, a community art space where the answer is always yes.
So our connection to the community is that this is a place that people can come to with a creative idea, and 99% of the time we find a way to make it happen.
As a volunteer and supporter of the arts, the eclectic studio at 620 is among the frequent destinations in Dara Webb's walkable downtown.
If I had to point at the single most important catalyst for what has happened here in St. Pete, I think it's probably the arts. That's when downtown St. Pete started to come back to life.
Creativity spawns more creativity. You just want to be around it.
And when you put art and urbanism together, you get something like Paris, and I don't think St. Petersburg is going to be Paris anytime in the near future, but if it became known as the Paris of Florida, that would be a step in the right direction.
The energy spreading from downtown has likely influenced the entire city of 250,000. Demographers believe the 2010 census will show the average age in St. Petersburg is below the national average.
You still have a large retired population here, but you have an increasingly young population as well. So you have it's much more diverse.
Ironically, in this city famous for retirees, blue hair has a whole new meaning. A younger generation may be the new normal in St. Petersburg, but another segment of the city's population is largely invisible, even though they live in plain sight. The homeless population that gathers in downtown parks just blocks away from the city's iconic waterfront remains a festering problem.
If you're here, you know, and you should be able to be here. That's part of being a community. And another part of being a community is that you take care of others in the community.
Joellen Schilke has run the Homey Globe Coffee Lounge for 10 years. Though confident interest in downtown will continue, she believes revitalization has been mixed.
I love the fact that there's a lot more people in downtown. I hate the fact that there's all these empty storefronts because of poor planning. I'm always interested in how people come to St. Pete and they think that they're going to start something and do something and they know what St. Pete needs and it doesn't work, and then they blame the town for the fact that they didn't come and learn about the place and let something grow organically.
Hammered by the recession, stores have closed throughout downtown. The most glaring business failures have been at Baywalk, a glitzy, high-profile, tax-supported retail and entertainment complex.
I go there a lot of times for the movies, but the stores were really uninteresting to a person who's a resident of the city.
Considered a linchpin of a revitalized downtown, the troubled Baywalk has been caught up in controversy, protesters, and unease about security.
There are people who will be intimidated by diversity, people of different color than they are, by different culture, wearing different kind of clothes, speaking a different kind of way. I mean, I think that's exciting. I mean, that kind of showed that St. Petersburg had some vibrance, some life. That draws protest. I mean, you know, people want to speak.
We speak and we want it now.
Among concerns over free speech, mismanagement, and the mix of stores, Baywalk has also included overtones of race. One is left to wonder if St. Petersburg's racial issues might have been bridged long ago. In a unique urban design rejected by voters in 1923, famed urban planner John Nolan hoped to create a harmonious new city.
And the whole idea was that citizens would interconnect and move through their cities by exploring the park systems. And his goal was to integrate the city rather than segregate it.
St. Petersburg's challenges have not deterred Lewis Murphy.
I think that there's just some issues that we have, within our cultures that's just going to be an ongoing process.
Reverend Murphy is pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church.
What a beautiful place to live and to be able to go to all types of venues downtown, just completely different than what I experienced back in 1976.
In the Renaissance of St. Petersburg, it seems people are reconnecting with the downtown tradition.
It's the forum of the Roman city. It's the place where people run into friends, run into people they don't know. It's a place where exchanges, social exchanges can take place. And I think it is a very important element of urban life.
From busy sidewalks to the outdoor Saturday market, St. Petersburg is cultivating the feel of an overgrown village.
Thank you very much, sir. Come back. How about you, young man?
The people like the idea of living in a place that they can then walk to work and walk to their coffee shop or go see music or go to the grocery store on bicycle or on foot.
Where is the future of real estate? Well, it's going to be in places that appeal to baby boomers, one end of the demographic, and it also appeals to millennials, the other end. And those places are going to be defined by providing a living environment where you can walk to a lot of places you want to go, where there'll be interesting spaces, and also where the arts will prevail. And if you look at downtown St. Petersburg, you have this wonderful mix that is being rejuvenated. And again, the public waterfront is the centerpiece of that because it provides this amazing aesthetic element, an amazing scene of beauty in the heart of a large city.
The public waterfront, there's no other place like it, I think, in the United States.
And it's absolutely the treasured resource of this downtown.
It reminds me that I live in a waterfront community, that I live in a town that really is on the water and intimately connected with the water.
It's one of the most visionary pieces of urban planning I can think of.
2010 marks the centennial of St. Petersburg's waterfront parks, now expanded to 5 miles of coastline.
You really can't give it a value. It's priceless because it's the place where citizens come to congregate, to speak, to enjoy works of art, music. It's essential that we have civic spaces to congregate and behave like citizens and behave in a civic manner. And what better place to see this in Florida than the St. Petersburg public waterfront?
From the way it looks and the way it feels and the way it is starting to live again, this unique American city has a remarkable sense of place.
The big one, oh, I had them on about 15, 20 minutes ago. I think it was a topper.
But change can have many sides. Gentrification has already pushed out some of the city's low-income elderly. Living downtown has also proved difficult for the working class.
People who were working at all the restaurants and working in the service industry couldn't afford to live in downtown.
Many of those working class people in this city are African American. As the city renaissance sort of spreads out from the downtown into the south side, there are very serious questions or problems about affordable housing, about people perhaps learning to live together in a more constructive fashion, as those old traditions of racial deference and of Jim Crow, of segregation, separation, I think are breaking down. So the city has a real challenge, I think, to spread the happiness, spread the positive changes of the new urbanism, not just to the favored few.
Currently, some 8,000 people live downtown. Before the recession, the long-term planning goal was 30,000 residents. That number may still be reached, but in a more reserved economic recovery, new residential projects may look more like the Madison than Ovation and Signature Place.
Maybe now we can take some of the stars out of our eyes and work on a livable downtown that's also affordable.
Could the meltdown of Florida's once red-hot real estate market have a silver lining? Is it a chance to take a broader, more measured look at St. Petersburg's urban future?
Have a mixed urban thing. We need to have people here who are only earning, in the 12, 20, 30, 40,000, as well as people earning 60, 70, 80, and we also need to make homes for those places who are people who are much more than that. And that if we have those three components living here, then we'll have a successful downtown.
If you want to create a downtown, let's create one that's people.
St. Pete is already in the future in that it is already a magnet for the arts.
But what we've not done really very much over the last 10 to 15 years is really add to the employment base downtown. And I'm a little worried for that.
You need young people You need the old folks like myself, but you need that connection between the two.
And just imagine if streetcars once again went down the middle of Central Avenue, and we had a transportation system that was truly a system where the auto was an option and not a necessity.
You just have to focus every single day remembering quality of life, quality of life, quality of life, quality of life.
It's having a more democratic approach to urban planning and look at what is going to benefit the majority and not serve the interest of the few.
City, the government has to be very, very aggressive in reaching out to economically deprived people.
I'm hoping that we can stay a real community with things accessible to people. I'm hoping that we'll continue to see tattoos and blue hair on the streets, as well as the older, more affluent patrons, because again, the future of the city is if it represents all the demographics of the people who live here.
As many Floridians and newcomers decide commuting from distant suburbs is not for them or their wallets, urban centers like downtown St. Petersburg will hold special appeal. With its history, charm, and waterfront beauty, the city by the bay is hard to resist. But in creating a livable and energy-efficient downtown where the car is an option, the Sunshine City must still confront a Florida sky full of challenges. Behind menacing clouds, questions about affordable housing, jobs, bridging a racial divide, compassion, the environment, the will of the people, questions in need of solutions.
So I'm excited about the future now, and also want to be a part of making the city of St. Petersburg a better place.
The prescription for Florida's health city is the return of a strong and stable economy. But St. Petersburg's brightest days may well rest in building a community where the watchwords are cooperation and togetherness, guiding principles for a new place in the sun.
This program was made possible by the Florida Humanities Council. We come from all over, and we become one state, where we share in the history and become part of the culture that is Florida. The Florida Humanities Council, bringing Floridians together by sharing the stories of our state.